So the Stoics really have a lot to say about how you educate emotions, how you become emotionally intelligent, we might say. And they have very complex descriptive layers for talking about the emotions. So it's not just the norms regarding good emotions, it's actually these very sophisticated cognitive notions that emotions are partly controllable because they have appraisals or evaluations, which is a leading theory in contemporary emotion theory. So I think the emotions are given full press by the Stoics, that the idea that to be Stoic, you have to be Victorian or Queen Elizabeth style or Prince Philip, stiff upper lip and not much more. I don't think that really reads the emotional theory, or both the theory and the prescriptions that the Stoics give us terribly well. So I'm all for the Stoics as telling us that we have some emotional skin in the game. And in Stoic wisdom, I try to explain how that's so. And I think also many pick up on the idea of the reformability of emotions by thinking about cognitive behavioral therapy, which some claim, the early founders, Ellis and Beck, claimed they had been inspired by reading the Stoics. And I think they're right. I think the Stoics give us a lot to work with in their account, both of descriptions and prescriptions. A way that many think of Stoicism is maybe through the lens of someone like Emerson, or just sort of even the Marlborough Man. If you think of Marcus Aurelius on a horse, it's a solo horseman. But really, Stoicism is not about self-reliance. At least there's many strands of it that aren't. The Stoics were amongst the first to think about cosmopolitanism. The term came to us from their predecessor, the Cynics in particular, one of the Cynics, Diogenes. But the idea is that we're citizens of the universe, we're globally connected. And Marcus Aurelius puts it best. He says, if you've ever seen a battlefield, he's thinking about the battlefield, it's during the Germanic campaigns, and you've seen a hand separated from the rest of the trunk, or a leg. That's what a person makes of herself when she cuts herself off from another. So the idea is that we are socially connected. We're building the social fabric, we're social capital of life, and that we are engaged in cooperative endeavors. I think that gets missed a lot, but that's really central to my book, Stoic Wisdom. So I think Stoicism, we should note, has been picked up by a lot of individuals in some toxic online sites, Reddit and others, as really being a highly masculine, manly sort of philosophy, and one that shows women that they have no real place in positions of power, positions of decision making, whether to do with their body or other things, and that they're temptresses or seductresses or the like. That is not Stoicism. Musonius Rufus, who is the teacher of Epictetus, asks, who should we teach? Who should be among our students? Who should we teach philosophy to? And he gives a resounding answer. And that answer is women should be included, girls should be included, because they have the same capacity for virtue. The Greek word is better translated excellence, arete, that boys or men do. And so they should be able to come to our classes as well. Now that really is a statement about the fact that whatever the context of the times and whatever the historical framing of ancient Greco-Roman Stoicism is, and it certainly isn't our context, there was an awareness at the time of a native capacity for women and girls to be to enter the Stoic halls, and that's really important. It's long been the case that ancient Greek philosophy and Roman philosophy and other parts of the culture have been misappropriated by those who are either misogynistic or white supremacists. The Nazis certainly pilfered some stuff from the Greco-Romans, thinking that they could bolster their views. And it's quite problematic. And it also needs to be said, some of the best scholars out there in classical philosophy, I'm not including myself here, but my teachers and those who have edited many, many volumes of work, from Martha Nussbaum to Julia Annis, are remarkable classical philosophers who study Stoicism. Gisela Stryker is another. And the idea that women can't do philosophy or aren't real Stoics just needs to be banished, both from the popular sites as well as from any academic conversation. So I think that's important to get out there. So the Stoics have become extremely popular because they have practices or techniques for managing fear. Someone like Tim Ferriss talks about fear setting, and Ryan Holiday has picked up on this idea as well, and Silicon Valley certainly, a life hack being a shortcut or a workaround that helps you with a problem. And in this case, you might say the art of living big, or fear of mortality or the like. I think that is true. The Stoics have some of that, but they're not really primarily self-help philosophers. Self-help has a huge market niche, but the Stoics are ancient ethicists, metaphysicians, logicians, and they're really thinking about how it is that, in the subject of ethics at least, you live a flourishing, thriving, what the Greeks call good life, good living, with virtue at its core. And that's what they're after. And if being overly engaged with fear objects, or overly angry at people that piss you off, or that insult you, or don't seat you, as Seneca says, at the banquet table where you think you should be, or if some guard at a door, a sentry at a door, doesn't let you in to a residence when you think you should be able to gain entry, and you get really angry or a little bit considerably irritated. That's something to meditate on at night and to calm yourself about it. But in addition, the underlying story is that maybe that anger isn't the sign of a good character. Maybe that kind of feeling of revenge, or how dare them insult me that way, maybe those come from places that aren't so good. So I think we tend to forget in the revival of Stoicism and modern Stoicism that what's really central to the Stoic story is good character, virtuous character, and that flourishing or thriving or living well has that at its core. That's straight out of Socrates. It's the Plato and Aristotle. And the Stoics pick up on it with a lot of good, pithy wisdom and tips, but they're not just about pithy wisdom and tips or life hacks. They really have a complicated, fascinating theory, and that has at its core, in the ethics part, how is it that we can live well, cultivating virtue, making moral progress, doing that in relationships with others where the stakes may be high and we may make ourselves vulnerable. Those others may not be so good as we initially thought, or they may predecease us. I recently got a note from someone, who had read the book and said it was the most uplifting book he had read, someone very familiar with Stoics, because he was able to think a little bit more about how you could only hold yourself to do the best in circumstances, no matter how cramped. And his circumstances were that he had a very sick wife, a disabled child, and a second career that wasn't going off after being in the military, and then finally on being unable because of the pandemic to visit his grandchildren. There were a lot of negatives in his life, but he somehow, it was clear from this letter and from inspiration from the Stoics that he was imagining his own goodness and the strength that he was able to muster as a result of his goodness. And I think that's really important. Managing fear and managing anger are kind of hollow if they're not rooted in what we ought value the most in that. So I think life hacks, whether they're to do with managing fear in your life or tempering anger, are hollow unless the management comes from a place that values virtue, that maybe you're not listening well to another person. Maybe revenge is not a particularly good way to respond to someone insulting you. Maybe we should switch from revenge to thinking about moral protest and figure out a way of thinking about that kind of anger as being a good kind of anger that not only may allow you to vent a little bit, but also would help you improve things in the world through the kind of moral protest that moral anger is directed toward.